Welcome everybody. I think we're probably gonna kick off because I know lots of you, lots of you are still, well, not lots of you because you're all in the audience already, but I think a number of people are still trying to get some coffees and pastries and so forth. But we do have an hour. As the panellists have said, am I going to actually ask them the questions that are down here? Yes, I am. I promise. But what I would obviously very much like, and although it didn't look like it earlier, I am reading the questions that come through on Slido. And so please do send me your questions. I will ask them. Apparently, do they come up? No, they just come up on my... Oh, okay. So I'm the only one who gets to the questions. But I will be asking them as long as they're not rude. So please ensure that you send me those. And is it hashtag... It's the same. Hashtag LREF23, is that right? And then select Fountain Room, please, for your questions. Your questions will make what I hope is going to be a good session great. So really, really looking forward to it. So the benefits of knowledge clusters, bringing together business, education and research. I think this morning, one of the things that came out of the discussion was the importance of partnerships, the importance of working together, the importance of collaboration, and actually the fact that those connections, if you like, need to be more than just the kind of normal ones, and we need to think really hard and innovatively about the types of not only businesses that we bring together, but the connections and collaborations that we make. I think there's nothing better to, I think, help shape a future when we draw together different disciplines and those people and organisations, as I said before, that aren't necessarily good bedfellows. So I'm not suggesting, I don't know why I'm going down this route now. Anyway, I'll stop there. But I would very much, as I said before, like you all to be very participatory in this conversation. And ahead of that, I'm obviously going to introduce my fabulous panel, Matt Flood.
Morning.
You are at least in the numbers that in line in terms of my panel in front of me. Matt Flood is Development Director of Brent Cross Town, and I'm sure Matt will, I hope, give a little bit of background to what he's been doing on a day-to-day basis. Kath Shaw, a regular. Always love to see Kath, Deputy Chief Executive of Barnet Council. Jonathan Burrows. Jonathan, CEO of Creative Places, and very nice to see you in person rather than we have had a number of conversations online, so very nice to see you in person. And last but not least, Linda Mason, Director of Sheffield Hallam University. So can I just ask everybody to welcome our panellists. I'm going to be so well behaved. I'm actually going to read out the question. So Matt, what is Related Argent? Should I try and do it like you don't know what's coming? Yeah. Hey, say Matt. Related Argent learnt from What has Related Argent learnt from King's Cross when it comes to creating a knowledge hub over time? And I think, actually, more importantly, how then do you transpose that to the work that you're doing in Brent Cross Town? Because clearly there's a fair amount of, of differences.
Yeah. Well, morning, everyone. I think it's really interesting to see how the kind of world has moved on from King's Cross through to where we are today. I think if we kind of rewind to when King's Cross was being established, I remember one of the first deals that the team did at the time was bringing in Central St Martin's into the granary building there. And I think at the time there were quite a few raised eyebrows, and that's a odd one to kick things off. Why they're bringing in a university? How is kind of having that big student population going to be compatible with what was being positioned as a commercial centre? And I think, fast forward to today, at Brent Cross Town, we were very clear from the outset, a major strategic goal for us was securing that educational anchor first up, and I think people now really understand the value that bringing in institutions such as Central St Martin's or Sheffield Hallam, and the way that can really set a tone and a foundation for a place. So I think it's really interesting to see how that's moved over the last 15 or so years. And I think a couple of reflections on the kind of learnings, just to kind of kick things off, would be it's around the right partnerships and then setting the right conditions. And I think just on the partnership, it's probably kind of building on what Sadie said in the introduction, that creating a knowledge quarter or a new district and is certainly a team sport, and none of us can do it on our own. None of us can act as kind of master planners. There's certainly got to be a kind of certain organic nature to it, and then just getting the right people involved to help share that load and help build it together. And I think that's where it becomes far more authentic and something that really then people can start to believe in. So I think getting those partners in early and those people that really share the vision for what that place wants to be and what the purpose, and crucially what the purpose of that place is. And I think then if you can get to that point, whatever you're doing starts to transcend a kind of pure real estate transaction. You know, it's far more than just putting the pieces on the board. It's how could you actually create a platform and a place where those can be greater than the sum of the parts in terms of the interactions that those partners have, and how you can foster that sense of community. So that comes on to the second bit, which is what are the right conditions. And getting the real estate is one part of that, but it's also the programming. You know, for a knowledge quarter, it's not just purely an office play. What's the residential? How can the people that want to come and live and work and study and research, can they have affordable places to live? Do they have the amenity on their doorstep, which means they can attract the right people? So it's far more than just looking at kind of the building blocks of the actual kind of commercial activity. What can the place offer those businesses? What can the partnership network offer those businesses? Which, I say, gives people a reason to be there, which goes beyond just a kind of pure real estate. So I think that's kind of reflections, and I think that, you know, it builds on what we're talking around, shared value, purpose, and how that is the kind of the thread, which means you can then create something really quite special.
And I'm sure Linda will answer this question. Sorry, I can't really help myself. But does it always have to be a kind of educational institution? It's like, I know the Central St Martin's was so key to King's Cross. Is it a bit like, oh, we've had one there, so we have to have an... I mean, what is it about the education, is, you know, kind of bringing an educator in that makes the difference, do you think?
I think it doesn't have to be, and I think they are, you know, one part of the jigsaw.
Yeah.
I think it's about getting all those different building blocks in place, you know, and Kath and the council are a key part of that as well. So that's where we come back to it very much being a team sport. I think from an educational point of view, without kind of stealing Linda's thunder, I think it's about the type of people they bring, the kind of young talent that they bring, the enthusiasm, the research capabilities, and, you know, Sheffield Hallam particularly are an incredible partner in terms of how outward-facing they are and how embedded they want to be in the wider place, and they want to participate in the wider place and not just operate within their four walls. And that's where their real value comes from, is that participation. And
just to tee up, thank you for the wider place segue there, because Kath, I mean, you know, it is a question, and I know you're always asked it, but I think it's really important to really understand how local authorities such as yours can support, you know, these types of regeneration projects, but at the same time making sure that you're maximising you know, the benefits for existing residents, existing businesses. You know, how do you ensure that you are educating and enabling your local community?
Can everyone hear me at the back? I'm not sure if the microphone is pointing. Brilliant, thank you. Well, just to follow on really about did it have to be HE? I think it's really important to say that with Brent Cross Town we were absolutely clear that we did not want to build a dormitory. We wanted to build a proper place, and so actually it wouldn't have to be higher education first, but we have to look at the ingredients of everything that goes into making a place a genuine part of the city, a genuine town, rather than simply somewhere where you live and then hop on the train into central London. So for us, having all of those ingredients that kind of make a place really successful and thriving, and higher education is absolutely one of those, was incredibly important. In terms of the role of the council in supporting that kind of ecosystem of the place, and not just a regeneration project, but that whole ecosystem, and we have loads of roles throughout councils. We're brilliant organisations. I know that Alexander said we weren't always perfect, and we're not, but we are really committed to our places. We deliver services. You know that we spend an awful lot of money delivering services. So our Barnet Pound is a really important part of how we can get that influence for the benefit of our residents. We're a regulator. I don't need to tell this audience about the planning system, but we also are environmental health, trading standards, licensing, so we actually kind of create a lot of the sort of framework in which the place operates. We are a regeneration partner, Matt's already talked about that. We're a convener of civil society, and I think that's really important, and I'll come back to that. And of course, we have that long-term stewardship role. We are in it for the long run. There was a real theme. I couldn't unfortunately stay for the whole of the earlier session, but there was a real theme in that about the importance of stability and certainty. And I think my experience of working with politicians in local government is that they are so committed to their places that actually they are able to provide that much longer term thinking and stability than perhaps central government. They're much less buffeted by an electoral cycle, and even when you see political change, actually the commitment to the long-term stewardship of the place is always there, and that does, there, with a few honourable exceptions, that does tend to make it much easier to kind of continue to work with us over the long run. So I would say that all of those different roles have a part to play in creating and supporting a knowledge cluster and an ecosystem. But seeing as Matt's already talked about regen, I will talk a little bit more about the convening role, because convening civil society is a bit of a jargony thing.
I love that. I've written it down. I'm using that. I'm taking that one away.
You can write this bit down as well. What it really means is we talk to loads of people. So we talk to education, further education, higher education schools, we talk to businesses, we talk to the NHS in all its various guises. We've really got to stop putting the in front of NHS because it's such a myriad of organisations. We talk to them all. We talk to our anchor institutions, RAF Museum, Saracens, as well as our higher education partners. And we can spot those synergies, those overlaps, those opportunities to get people together and to help them deliver their goals together, see the overlaps, see the synergies, really kind of get the place working as a whole. And I think, one of the things that there's a couple of my colleagues from my team in this room, and I'm sure they're all bored of me hearing me say this, but
never.
When the going gets tough, when the council is short of money, when the economy is going to hell in a handcart, the temptation to look down and in and just focus on what you have to do is so great. But what you absolutely have to do is look up and out at all those partnerships to make sure that you are all being more than some of your parts for the places that you serve, because otherwise it's going to be a really rough time ahead. So we will continue to look up, look out and work with our partners. I was delighted, by the way, when we first arrived, Jonathan and Linda were having a chat, and Linda sort of said, when some universities come to London, they just kind of build a box and put their courses in it, but we really want to be part of the community, and that sort of shared sense of values is why we're so pleased to be working with Sheffield Hallam at Brent Cross.
Thank you. I do love that convener of civil society, and you also said the ingredients that's needed, and it is, I don't know, I think it's a really nice way of putting it, that sort of, but making sure the ingredients are right, actually, and that you don't do anything like my cooking, which is appalling, in terms of throwing in the things that don't work, I think is actually also a really good analogy. Jonathan, this morning, one of the things that I kept calling him Alex, he's going to kneecap me because it's Alexander, but he came to talk about how London sits within the kind of global, among the global players. And I know that you have a lot of experience in terms of benchmarking, understanding best practice outside of the UK, and I think that how do we learn from others? How not just King's Cross, but how do we if we're looking across Europe in terms of the kind of those multidisciplinary ecosystems, what is it that they can we learn anything in terms of the policy and funding that's supporting their developments? How are those public-private partnerships working? Could you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah. I think if I may, I just might start by contextualising this, because I think that going forwards we're going to need to rethink what makes us content and happy. And I think we are going to need to become more adaptable.
Yeah.
and more inventive. And cities and their districts have a really important role to play in helping to facilitate that. So we've just touched on education, and I think that upskilling, reskilling is going to be really important. And the ways in which education providers can get involved with helping people find new things to do, new ways of doing things, innovation and enterprise, it's all interlinked at the end of the day. So it's really important that we contextualise the importance of developing these ecosystems in terms of what we need for the future. We've got climate change and AI disruption now upon us. So it really is vital that those involved with policy and thinking about how we develop places are up to speed with the issues that are so urgent and need to be attended to. And we do need to look elsewhere to see how others are faring and how others are tackling this. I think the issue of money comes up regularly because here in the UK we tend to do things on a shoestring. By comparison to, say, America and the way in which they've gone about creating places for innovation and enterprise built around their universities and education establishments. If you take Massachusetts Life Science Centre, for example, by comparison to our MedCity organisation, when that Life Sciences Centre was set up in 2008, they actually had $1 billion, $1,000 million for a 10-year program. And when we set up MedCity, it was like a million, I think it was, from the mayor's office and 2 million from HEFCE. And some partners came together to build the life sciences ecosystem. I don't think money is what it's all about. In Germany, they tried to encourage the startups that they were jealous of what were being created here in the UK. And what they found was that by putting a lot of money into small companies, the guys setting up the businesses were typically working 9 to 5 still and weren't actually challenged as much as those individuals working here on a shoestring trying to make their businesses a success, where it was all or nothing. And so money isn't everything, but I do think we need to ensure, by way of policy, that we recognise the importance of these districts and we put money into initiatives that can help pump prime the activity of others that are so keen and willing to put their energy and time into building what our people need for the future.
And is that through tax breaks, or is that, what are the mechanisms for that?
I think I would put grants at the top of the list. I think that having some grant money that can help facilitate and ensuring that those grants are consistent for that facilitation is probably the most important thing. But if you look at Amsterdam, for example, where there is an Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions, I'd encourage you to have a look at the website for that organisation. The principal organisations behind that are Delft University, Wageningen and MIT. There is a bit of public sector money, but I think it's a combination of those coming together, recognising the importance of the agenda that I talked about right at the outset. How are we going to evolve our cities so that they serve people in a sustainable way? How are we going to help people find new jobs, new things to do and that are going to be fulfilling? And how are we going to ensure that congestion and pollution are not holding our health back and ourselves back? And how do we start to really tackle climate change and the issues that are upon us? And it's very urgent. So in the round, I'd say some money is important, but seeing the big picture is critical for ensuring that the limited resources we do have are invested in the right way.
Yeah, and I think that Linda, don't panic here, but but when Jonathan was speaking, I was thinking, actually, if anyone is here to understand how to inspire and educate the next generation in innovation, and in terms of how do we prepare our next generation for all of the challenges that you've spoken about, and in a world where money is not going to be necessarily forthcoming, I think I won't ask you that, but it did run through my mind in terms of the responsibility that you have actually within this ecosystem to be really kind of challenging how we look to the future. And I suppose that is, you are a significant anchor, to this, to Brent Cross Town, and I love this question actually, which is why I'm definitely going to ask it, which is, what is the university learning as plans take shape? So what is it that you're doing? I'm going to add a little bit to that. What are you learning, and are you doing things differently because of it? Is it shifting your mindset? Is it shifting your plans? Do you have a different kind of end game because of the short term understanding of what's going on?
I think that's an interesting question, because I think the reasons why we chose to go into partnership in Brent Cross Town are very much around the themes of this conference, around value and shared values as well, which people have talked about. And I think for us that's been critical in kind of our thinking around what we can really bring to Brent Cross Town, and what we can learn from our experiences in Sheffield to bring to a different location. And a lot of people have asked, why London? We're well known in Sheffield. Why would you want to set up a campus in London? Part of it is about our own profile and reach, obviously, and kind of becoming better known nationally. But it is also about taking what we've learned as a civic university and applying that in a different context, and taking the really good things that we know about working in partnership with employers, whether that's public or private sector, the skills development for students, and the links that we can create with employers through placements, through project work, through community engagement is really critical, as well as the kind of research side of things as well. So I think some of the key things that we're learning as we've been going along is around being really targeted. We can't replicate exactly what we do in Sheffield in London. That's just, we're a huge campus in a city. We're not going to be that. So it's about being really targeted in our thinking around where we can really add value, and where we can work with partners to add that value. I think the other thing we're learning as well is how we create the town as our campus, if that makes sense. So when again, as Kath was saying, we're not a building that just delivers teaching. We want to be connected in with the communities that we're serving and we're working with, and so how can we integrate with the town, utilise the different services that are offered there, and ensure that our students are linked in and our researchers are linked in with things that are going on within the wider place. So that's really important to us, and I think we're learning a lot more about how we can do that most effectively through partnership, and going into partnership with different employers and others on the site.
And is that about signposting? How do you set that kind of framework, that governance structure up in order to make that happen? Because it all sounds great, but actually often the practicalities of ensuring that you are, you have the kind of infrastructure, if you like, to make those connections, to kind of bring the other institutions, players back into the university. Is that? How do you make that happen? How does that work?
Well, I think it does take time,
Yeah.
and I think it feels like we're very early in the journey still on some of this. But I think it is about utilising the connections we've already got amongst the different partners that we're working with, and finding opportunities. I think we'll probably explore a vast number of different opportunities, and only one or two of them will actually come to development. But actually, it's having those conversations, I think, and being open to having those conversations across a whole breadth of different areas that I think will add the most value. And as I said, I think we're still early days with some of that, but I think there's been some really useful conversations between some of our Sheffield-based research centres and people in Brent Cross Town around some of the things we could do around health and well-being and lifestyle. And it's trying to think about how we can just pick one or two key things that we can then take forward.
And I've got a question here around London's life science sector, and I'm quite interested in the room. How many of you here from the life sciences sector, or would you say you are? Well, that's good, because I'd like you to send me some Slido questions, please. But you're here for a kind of, I guess you're here for a very good reason, and the question here is around the challenges that are faced by London's life sciences sector. And is that particular to London? Is it? Everybody's trying desperately to be the next hub of life sciences. How do you distinguish yourself from others in that space, or don't you? Do you see it as a kind of national move forward, UK PLC, or is it something specific to London? I don't know if that's I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to pick up on that.
Okay, have a go. I think that the life sciences sector in London, and indeed Cambridge/Oxford, the Golden Triangle, is absolutely phenomenal. It is world leading. We have there 5 of the world's top universities, and in terms of interdisciplinary work, which is really important now for the future in life sciences, we've got a breadth and depth of research that we can build upon that is extraordinary. I think that for the sector going forwards, I think it does need the right property to be delivered, but I think the industry has responded to that now, and we're underway seeing a lot of development happening in a lot of the good places. But I think that there are still challenges around access to the NHS and the way in which we regulate and ensure that companies developing products and services can easily sell them internationally, not just within this country. So there's quite a bit for us still to do, but I think we've got a platform that's very sound, and it's interesting to see the sector really start to flourish now.
It's a conversation that came out of a symposium that I'd come to was about aligning it's like, why is the NHS, you picked up a little bit about it, Kath, why do we talk about the NHS as kind of separate, or healthcare providers as separate to development? It's so intertwined. The fact that the built environment is makes a huge impact into our health and well-being is like, there's enough evidence now that happens. How do you, when you are looking to that holistic, that kind of, but bigger than the sum of their parts, ensure that you are, you're that within the regeneration of your places, that you have shops that people can afford. You can buy a coffee that's not £5.50. You can buy a loaf of bread that's not £6 rye, and and you can actually make sure that you aren't just giving fast food pizzas. And how do you ensure that you have that kind of balance of good ground up, local sourced opportunity and I don't know, integration, I suppose. There's a question here. Thankfully, we're getting a few more questions. Thank you very much, and lead me to do them. But I don't know. It's just it's really interesting because it goes to that kind of, it's not just it's not just one thing. It needs to be a whole load of others. There has to be kind of policies, and like, no, we're not going to have X coffee shop come in, we're going to do something else. How does that work? It'd just be really interesting, I suppose, Matt, if you could pick up on that, or Kath.
And the way we've looked at it is, and when we first formed the partnership with Barnet, we landed on 4 pledges, and they were essentially the promises of what we wanted this place to be and what the legacy and purpose of this place would be. And one of those is to create a place where all can flourish. And the pledges aren't just a kind of marketing narrative. What they are is that every decision we make since we started this project, they're the lens through which we make that decision. So, to your point, Sadie, if we're looking at the high street and what do we want the character and purpose of the high street to be, we look at it through those lenses and say, oh, well, is that delivering on the pledge that we made around creating this flourishing place, around creating a sustainable that supports healthy lifestyles, and Halma are a key part of that. I think so. As long as you can kind of stay true and use that as your way to kind of frame decisions, you can ensure that then you can make what started out as a narrative become a lived reality for those people. And I think the final thing to say is just around the flourishing index, which we're creating with the University of Manchester and others, is we're going to measure it. And a lot of people talk about health and well-being and how do you respond to those themes. But by putting this flourishing index, we're going to do a data-driven approach where every year we'll understand the extent to which people feel they're flourishing, how is the town serving it versus what we set out to do, and then that can be our feedback loop. So we can say, right, this isn't working, this is working well, and that informs the future phases. Yeah. So I think that's really important, and being transparent about that. We're going to make mistakes, we're not going to get it right, but being open enough to say, right, we're going to understand that, plug it back in, and hope we can have that kind of continuous improvement.
I think it is that learning, isn't it? Long-term learning and making sure. I mean, it goes to the question that was asked about, to Linda, what Sheffield learning. Luckily, an anonymous person.
Well, I was just going to comment on
Yeah.
your last couple of points, actually. So you mentioned about, in terms of life sciences, are we collaborating, are we competing?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us exist
I
in the world...
I love it when you turn my waffle into a really good question, and that some anonymous person's done that in the audience. Thank you very much.
But no, I mean, I think a lot of us exist in a world where we recognise that we are always both collaborating and competing, and there are 32 London boroughs plus the City of London. We all want the best for our borough, but we all also know that our boroughs only succeed if our city succeeds. And I think, we are quite kind of comfortable with that idea that actually it is absolutely in our interests for, success to happen all across London, because that makes it a lot easier to deliver local benefit for local communities. So I wouldn't want people to be hearing that conversation as a sort of tension, because it's a thing that we're all quite comfortable managing, and of course we want Oxford to be successful, and Cambridge to be successful, and King's Cross to be successful, and the cancer centre at Sutton to be successful, because actually that will make Brent Cross a stronger knowledge hub, because we are existing in that much bigger ecosystem. On the point about the mix of offer, those of you that were at the TfL thing, very first thing this morning, they talked about wanting to learn from the great estates, and I think there's a huge amount we can learn from them. I have a very clear memory when we were very first soft market testing for a partner for Brent Cross Town, sitting in the Grosvenor offices and then pointing out the window and saying, we could let every single square metre in this neighbourhood in Mayfair to Donna Karen or Tommy Hilfiger for a huge rent, but actually it would fail as a place, because where would the shop fitters get their sandwiches at lunchtime? Where would the office workers get their dry cleaning done? You have to have that degree of curation. We're really lucky in the case of the big estate, the big regens, in the case of Brent Cross Town and other places, because actually we can set it up, we have set it up to have that long-term interest in the success of the place, which means we have got that ability to curate and to, one of the things that Related Argent have done, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is work with existing local businesses and put them in some shops that are going to get demolished in a couple of years' time, to help them grow their offer and their sustainability, so that when we have our first new retail units, we've got ready-made businesses to go into them. And that sense that we're doing it for the long term and curating it is fantastic. It's really hard to do in an existing town centre where you've got a dozen different landlords, all of whom just want to get the highest rent. But actually on these big curated schemes, it's really...
And that is an
great.
excellent answer to the very nice person who anonymously put my question in when transforming a place such as Brent Cross and introducing large organisations, how do you keep things affordable, accessible for local businesses? So thank you for that question, and I think an excellent answer. Please keep them coming in terms of questions. I've got one here, and I suppose this one's directly to Matt, and it says, how will you guarantee that hard-to-reach groups will engage in your survey in order to get an honest representations on the changes in the local area of Barnet? And actually, I want to throw this one out to. I'm going to add another question to it, in the hope that you'll be able to pick on both, and that's about young people, and how are we ensuring that the university in particular, this is a question, is engaging with the local community, and how does Related Argent aim to get the voices of young people? I mean, I think that's a kind of question, hopefully for all of you. So I'm going to start with this, how do you ensure that if you go out and say, we're listening, we're testing, we're measuring, that you are in fact doing so in those hard to reach places?
Yeah, it's a very good question, a fair challenge. I think the first thing to say around the flourishing index is that it's both people that are in the town itself, but also within a radius. So it picks up those existing communities to ensure that we're not just creating, an oasis of positivity, that actually the regeneration is a force for good, and it's not gentrification, to kind of use what's a kind of more negative connotation. And that was really, really important to Barnet, that this can be a force for good in the wider borough. And I think in terms of, on a practical level, the data collection, it's a mix of direct, quantitative and qualitative and observational data as well. So, working with someone like University of Manchester, who is independent, to try and create that rigour, we're hoping that it will, but we'll learn. And as I say, we'll learn in the methodology and we'll, hopefully it'll become clear from the feedback if there are certain groups not engaging with it, then that gives us a challenge that we need to go and face head on. But having Barnet as a partner is incredibly powerful because we can ensure that the outcomes of that are delivering for the communities that they serve.
And Linda, to pick up on that kind of the youth.
It's really important to universities, obviously.
Yeah.
And one of the key things we do in Sheffield that we're looking to translate into in our campus in London is around our schools and college engagement work.
Yeah.
And working really closely with local schools and colleges, understanding kind of what those students think of higher education, what kinds of things they want to go on to study, understanding their aspirations and supporting increasing those aspirations sometimes as well to move into higher education. That's a really important aspect of the work that we do, that we're known for actually, nationally probably around kind of transforming lives and supporting students from poorer backgrounds, maybe who haven't first generation going to university to go into the university setting. So, we really want to kind of replicate that within London, and I think that'll be the way that we'll draw an understanding of what those young people want from higher education in Brent Cross Town.
And that, appealing to those, as you say, who've not necessarily ever gone to university, who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. There's a question here about, how do you maintain social value to those people who, who might feel that they're the kind of forgotten, not just generation actually in terms of our young people, but those who are like, well, it's totally outside of our grasp, our reach. It's not, not for us.
I think from a university perspective, it's about accessibility and looking at a range of different options for students. So it's not just the traditional full-time undergraduate degree where you live away from home, and that's not the model so much anymore anyway. It's definitely shifting. So it's looking at different opportunities for students, different models of delivery, so that block delivery, where students can come onto campus just for 1 or 2 days and can work at the same time, which I think is much more appealing for people. But then also just thinking around higher and degree apprenticeships as well. We're a big provider of degree apprenticeships, and I think that's again an area that we're replicating in London to look at how we can give choice to students.
And that, Jonathan, I want to bring you in because you talked, I think, really eloquently about that kind of needing to innovate and that, money isn't everything. And I wondered, in that respect, when your question about what are others doing, how do you benchmark? If you, when you are looking to do something innovative, you often do pilot projects. You often have to do something. If this is for long-term gain. It's like everyone's like, oh yeah, yawn. I'm not going to wait 10 years. There's a question here about kind of, how can more immediate term, meanwhile, activations sow those seeds and help create community ecosystems in the long term. I think it's a really good question. Thank you. Actually, Michael. You have put your name down. Thank you, Michael, for that question. So, how do you, is that something that you have experience of, or you've seen elsewhere in terms of all these amazing, places that you talk about? Do they do? It's like, let's have some low-hanging fruit. Let's have some energy and pace in this regeneration. We know it's going to take a long time, but let's see some immediate returns.
So that Institute of Advanced Metropolitan Solutions that I referred to in Amsterdam, if you take a look at their website, the work they're doing to enable people to test ideas and to ultimately then nurture the ones that are seen to have traction and that might go somewhere, to then enable those to scale up into space is one of the key things that they work on. I think it's also important to talk about the way in which these initiatives need to involve so many partners to make them successful in the ways we're talking about. So when you talk about perhaps enabling people from poorer socioeconomic backgrounds getting into better education and then into skilled jobs, I think there's quite a role for charities to play here in helping literally from primary school age and up. Those primary school children finding a safe or a quiet place where they can come after school just to do a bit of study or to just talk to people about the options that might be open to them or what they're interested in and where they might want to go. there is so much that can be gained from getting to people when they're really young, literally primary school age. And this requires charities and the like to get involved, because the rest of us just haven't got the resource to be able to spend the time that those sort of individuals are going to need. So I think that it's a case of widening the stakeholder group and then being willing to test ideas, and some of them will fly and some of them won't.
Yeah, it's that embracing failure point, isn't it, Kath?
Yeah.
I think the other thing about making the higher education offer available to the whole community is the point that Linda made about the town is our campus, combined with the work that we've done already at Brent Cross Town to put some of the community infrastructure in place. So if you go to Brent Cross Town now, yes, you'll see a big building site, but you will also see 2 parks, one of which is there for the long term, one of which is a temporary park, which are absolutely full of local kids. And if you go there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you will see the school uniforms of all the local schools in those parks. And that means Brent Cross Town is their place. Before the first new person has moved in, they've taken ownership of Brent Cross Town as a place and as an idea. And with the university campus being the whole town, the thing we're working towards is that all those kids are comfortable and familiar with Sheffield Hallam as a thing that's there in the place that's their place. It's a and so it's not a scary big remote sandstone building, with a spire. It's actually part of the place that they've already taken ownership of and taken possession of, and hopefully that way we can those primary school kids, by the time they're applying to universities, it won't be a weird alien thing. It'll be, oh yeah, we know what university is because there's one just here in our place.
Yeah. I think it really feels that, I don't know, that sort of energy in that you're drawing people drawing the community into a space, into a place, and that kind of feeling comfortable is so important. It's like not feeling as an outsider. I think it's coming across. Oh my God, they're coming in thick and fast now. Thank you for that. I have a question here, which is sort of slightly changing tack. But I'm going to ask it because Matt, you've sent this in. How will Related Argent and Sheffield Hallam embrace new technologies and digitalisation? I'm never very good at reading out things, to deliver a better, smarter, greener place. I would say that's been planted, but actually, I think it is interesting, isn't it? If we're talking innovation, if we're talking new technologies, science hubs, what is it? Is there kind of direct or tangible example?
Do you want to lead?
Well, I think, again, it feels like we're still at exploratory stage on some of this. But one of the key subject areas we're looking to teach in Brent Cross is around computing and digital skills. Yeah. So I think we will be looking to how we can utilise research in those areas to really bring the best experience for students and the wider communities that we're working in. But I think it's difficult to know. I mean, technology changes so quickly as well. Yeah. We're planning for opening in 2026, which feels like a long way away, but it'll soon be here. And things can shift dramatically in those times. So I think for us, it's about working again in partnership, looking at what we can do to fit in and use technology to be part of that wider town. So we have talked about apps and things like that to kind of signpost people to places and integrate the university's offer into that. But at the moment, that's kind of the start of it, I think, rather than the end.
So going to that kind of signposting, you can't do it all, but there is lots of really good places that are, in fact, already embedded in the community that are doing those things, that are offering. We had a really a good challenge a couple of days ago from a local somebody. I won't say where, but from local community, saying you don't have to build another community hub. We have 4 libraries, all in our local area, all of which people feel safe and comfortable in, but aren't being given the kind of energy and kind of money and resource that they need. Let's actually embrace what we have and use our influence and our kind of ability to coalesce those around us to do something kind of that impacts really does impact local communities. I will let you answer the question that I posed to you, Matt, but there's another one here which I would love to use as the last question of the day, but we haven't got there yet, but I'm going to answer it now because I want you all to have a go at this one. It says, the only certainty is change was mentioned earlier. was by Caroline in the opening session. What has been the most challenging change yet from the initial master plan vision, and how did you pivot, adapt? That is mean, whoever that anonymous person is who's written that, but it's a really good question. Talking about learning, or maybe it's too. I'm going to start with you, Matt, on that one.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask it to all of you, and it might not be this particular master plan, but perhaps a kind of reflection on things that, you know, the big ticket items that sometimes go awry.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, you know, since I joined 18 months ago, 2 years ago, it's been an incredibly changing environment. So I think what you have to kind of keep in mind is that this is a 10, 15-year master plan. As I say, we have a very kind of clear strategy on what we want this place to be. And so whilst you're kind of facing short-term headwinds or changes, it's around just making sure you're staying true and they don't become something which kind of knocks you off path. It just means that you can adapt to them. So, you know, on a very practical level, we have an outline planning consent for 10 million square foot. But what we are able to do is kind of bring forward different uses, have that flexibility to change the business plan to make sure we can respond to market demand. So, you know, things like hotel or student housing is where we see there's traction in the market. Is how can we bring forward some of those elements, and some elements, you know, maybe get pushed back because the absorption or the market forces aren't allowing us to deliver those as quickly as we like. So I think it's staying true to what the vision is and what you want to deliver, but recognising that you're going to have to flex, and the path is not going to be a straight one. But as long as you're clear on where your end goal is, there's lots of different ways of getting there. And I think, again, it's not a broken record, it comes back to having partners that can support that and work with you on that, and understand that that's just, you know, we're all operating in the environment that we're handed, and we just need to be responsive to that.
But you know, we all, this morning, you know, there's a lot to be said about the kind of economic headwinds, but there's also the changing demographics. There's the fact that very few people are coming back to, you know, not necessarily coming back to their office places. You know, how as a CAF, how do you, you know, encourage and, you know, those, I'm not saying there are tensions, but when there may be tensions in terms of the things that you want as opposed to Related Argent, you know, it's like you see something that's changing, and, you know, your priorities may be different. How does I'm changing my questions as they go.
You are changing your
Sorry,
questions.
you can stick to the first one.
So I think the world caught up with us a bit with COVID. So when we went out and procured the partnership with Related Argent, and some of you have heard me say this before, we really wanted to focus on a place that offered health and well-being at its core. Really agree with what Jonathan said. We have to think about what we want from our cities that makes us happy in a very, as you say, changing world. So we had already been very clear up front that we wanted health and well-being at the heart of it, and that has been a really kind of solid platform from which to tackle the inevitable kind of, you know, micro tensions. Is there anyone here from Hammerson? Is there anyone here from Network Rail? Okay, so I'll give you an honest answer then. So we've just built a train station. It's going to be open by the end of the year. It's fantastic. If you have any ounce of train geekiness in you, come and visit our station. It's a wonderful thing. It was due to be funded through a kind of tax increment financing model from the expansion of the shopping centre. And then just as we were about to literally put the first spade in the ground, Hammerson decided that it was the wrong time to expand the shopping centre. Now, I think in hindsight we would all agree that Hammerson made the right choice in not investing in having a, you know, double-sized shopping centre. But that was a bit challenging because we had to then go back to government and say, you know how we were going to pay half of this station? We're not anymore. You just need to give us another couple of £100 million. And in fairness, they did. So thank you very much, Treasury. You do some things right some of the time. And yeah, do come and see our station when it's open, because it's amazing.
Yeah. I have, and it is Jonathan. You're allowed to answer any one of those questions that I put towards you.
Just going back to the point about adaptability, I think you know, with ChatGPT coming through this year strongly and where it's going to go, you know, we could see education being disrupted quite significantly. I think the point I would make is that we're about place making, and we're creating places where people come together, children come together, whatever it is. And I think that we're all going to need social interaction and benefit from that, and build our social capital. So regardless of all these changes that are going to take place, I think the way we build places for people, and we recognise that there is going to be a need to change and adapt to what it is that people need is the most important thing.
I think. I'm not allowed to clap. That was no. I mean, I was just putting that under convener of a civil society. I mean, I think it is. You're right. There's a framework that needs to be built around a value that is much more is much more about people, about our lived experience. You wrote something down. You said something really earlier, which I thought was lovely, but I can't see my notes enough to find it. But I think that is, it's exactly actually what today is all about. So Linda.
Yeah, I think I'll just pick up on a few points that have already been raised, actually. I think it's about that, to be adaptable, I think you do need to be in it the long term, and I think it's that long-term commitment is really important, because then you can weather those changes as they happen. And I think that's certainly what we want to do in this development, is to be in it for the long term. And we know that things will change. We know that we'll have to grow our provision, we'll have to grow our reputation gradually. But it's we're in it for the long term, and that can hopefully help weather some of that change and uncertainty potentially. So I think that's really important. But I think also then the partnership aspect and the shared sense of values around what we're trying to achieve, as Kath pointed out, the sort of the importance of kind of health, well-being, flourishing in a place. That's really important. That's a really strong value that I think all the partners in this development share, and I think that's therefore helps with that kind of any changes that we might need to make, and delays or problems that may occur. I think that's really important that we've got that shared sense of purpose and values.
We're coming to the end. Thank you for the flourish of questions. I think actually most of them have been answered in the conversation that we've had. As none of you were in the opening session, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the panelists earlier, which is that if you've written your letter to Rishi, you've set out your stall. What would be your PS? At the end of the letter, I'm just going to give you a few minutes to have a think about that, because with my other panelists, I did actually I did warn them, particularly as I had the deputy mayor, and politicians never like to be wrong-footed. But I'd just like to sort of not only thank the panelists, but I suppose reflect on the conversation that we've had. Whenever we talk about Brent Cross Town, and I was here at the session last year, it does. I think that the kind of care and consideration that is given by all the players in this particular piece of kind of, I think, in terms of the kind of regeneration is really heartening, and the sort of I think that you're always. There's this sort of we might not get it right always, but we're really trying, and we're really trying to kind of understand and bring communities along with us, and I think that comes out really clearly in the conversations. I think it's very exciting to have Sheffield Hallam University, and it sounds to me as if you really are thinking hard about innovating in terms of making sure that you are reaching those who may not have really ever been to university, or feel, as I said before, that it isn't something for them. And that kind of, Jonathan, it would be great, wouldn't it, that you can look to other places, other European cities, but wouldn't it be wonderful? I mean, I know King's Cross always comes up as one of those top of the agenda, success stories, but it feels to me that, Brent Cross could really be one of those too. So a very exciting place to watch. And ahead of giving you a big clap, I'm going to ask that question. I wasn't allowed to say what the deputy mayor said. So Linda.
Oh gosh, I think I would just say it's. Don't forget it's about an ecosystem, and actually higher education is part of that and can play a significant part of that. That'd be my kind of PS.
Jonathan?
I'd say for people to vote blue, you need to be green.
You're in the comms department, surely. Kath?
I have a politically restricted job, so there is no
Oh.
way I am allowed to write to
Okay.
Rishi.
Okay.
But if I did, I would say, P.S. Local government is awesome. Just trust us to get on with it.
Yeah. You're not getting away with it, Matt.
Okay. Well, depending on what's gone in the content before, our PS would be, it really is an emergency, wake up.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you so much.